All right, and we are live and on the air. Welcome, everyone, to episode 17 of Narrations and Lamentations with Mittierim and the boys. As always, I am Mittierim. With me are the boys, Skip and Michael.
Hello.
Hi.
And with us tonight is our special guest, is Mr. Kieran Dunleavy. Kieran, if you would like to go ahead and introduce yourself for the folks who may not know you from my channel.
Well, hello, folks from the channel. I am here because I supposedly know stuff about high elves, and that might be true. We'll find out over the next hour or so. But I'm a Warhammer veteran of nearly 20 years, with many, many painted armies polluting my house, as my wife would call it, or populating my house, as I say it. So yeah, I feel that I may have some interesting insights to share.
Awesome. Thank you for being with us. I'm sure we'll all have a good time, and God knows, maybe we'll learn or teach something. So we'll go ahead and get started with a little of what we're doing in the hobby today. And I actually want to start with, we're going to break our normal order a little bit, and I actually want to go with Skip, since this week marks his triumphant entrance to the world of Warhammer YouTubing. So if you want to go ahead and talk a little bit about what you're doing, Skip, and then we'll go to Kieran and discuss kind of how that week in the hobby's going.
Well, I got bored, and I really needed some help with my Dark Elves, because I was actually thinking about selling them. So I decided to do a YouTube video just asking for people's help into putting together lists, what I should look for with the certain, different types of like core and things like that. And I got a good response so far, so it's been a very positive experience, and I actually got a win, so it worked. So
I am still trying to get his curled-toed boot out of my ass from the beating I took yesterday.
And speaking of Dark Elves, that is actually what I am painting this month for my PMP submission. I'm actually doing some shades to add to my army, so that is what I am working on.
Well, fantastic. How about you, Kieran? What's on the hobby table at the moment?
Well, appropriately, I am still painting more high elves. I just remarked that I am pretty close to having finished all of the high elves that I own. So that entails 15 Reaver Knights, 1 Chariot, and about 2 Heroes. Then everything I own will be done.
Out of curiosity, what kind of point value does that put you at as for what you own in terms of high elves?
Well, I've painted more than 7,000, I would say. So whatever these ones add up to, we'll round that up.
Goodness gracious. That is a hefty amount of elves.
Yeah, really the only thing missing from it, and this is probably going to be the thing to round it out that I'll do in the future, is I don't have a single Phoenix Guard, and I don't have any Lion Chariots. So for the sake of that might have to happen.
That's pretty impressive that that's all you're missing.
Yeah.
As a side note, for anybody who doesn't know Kieran's work, he was one of the first people that I actually saw as far as painting the Phoenix and posing it, that actually posed it in a way that made it useful on the table. Because I saw you put it basically up sideways, so it's like in a banking turn, and that's so much better than what everyone else does of just putting the empty base on the table and sitting the Phoenix on the side of the table when it invariably breaks off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it makes it way easier for transport too, I'll tell you that.
I can imagine.
Did you also see the Fire Phoenix swooping down on a troll?
I don't know that I caught that one. No. You have to send me a picture of that one. That sounds.
Later. It was another adventure, I guess, in posing of a big model. Yeah, I'll show it off to you in a little bit.
Awesome. So, Michael, what you got on your table this week?
Silverhounds and Spearmen.
So
because
definitely
the elves declared they must be painted.
Right.
So
And
Mike, are you?
I got
Maybe I'm getting ahead of myself here, but Mike, are you intending to go pretty heavy cavalry with that army, or is that just what you've begun with?
No, that's what I'm planning on doing. Mainly Dragon Princes and Silverhounds.
Love it.
cool.
Good man.
And I totally have to tell on Michael here. We got together for our game last night, and we all know that he's a dwarf lover. We had actually assumed last night that he had completely painted his dwarves before turning to these knife ears, and he actually showed up with about, 20 models unpainted on the table, man?
Oh, they're Thunderers, and I just don't want to paint them.
Sad.
They stare at me like this depressed look, and I'm just like, I can't do it, guys. There's too much on you. I don't want to paint.
Alicia yelled at him when she saw the unpainted models on the table.
Shame's
So-
a good motivator, isn't it?
Yeah.
Let's hope so.
I don't feel ashamed.
No, you just don't feel motivation is the problem.
That's true.
As far as me, I painted most of my stuff that I have going. I'm still working on 2 man-eaters. One they call the ASPCA, as everybody apparently thinks I'm doing horrible things to horses by making my Bretonia conversion. The other one, I'm working up a dwarf man-eater with the Slimo Hawk and a barrel of Bugman Septuple X next to him, and a couple of other little things. So I'm having fun adding more strange stuff to the man-eaters. So. And I'm using way too much green stuff to do all this too, by the way.
Well, it looks like you're having a fun adventure with it, though.
It is. I'm having a good time. They may not look as good as like some folks do, but I'm happy with them, and they give me something new to field in the army. And I mean, if you have a good time, what else can you ask for but that, right?
Exactly.
All right, guys. Well, looks like we got a lot going on in the hobby today, so we're going to go ahead and get on into our rankings. For those who haven't seen, we're going to rank the High Elves in terms of mechanics, fluff, and fun, whether to play for or against. As always, we strive to have 2 High Elf players with us. Tonight that will be Kieran and Michael, and 2 High Elf opponents, which are myself and Skip. So, as our guest of honor tonight, Kieran, if you'd go ahead and let us know your thoughts.
Well, I think if we're looking at storyline for the Elves, I think of them as one of the small handful of iconic Warhammer armies that laid the foundation for it. The other being the Dwarfs and the Empire, the Chaos and the Orcs and Goblins. So I kind of lump them in there with the originals. Therefore, their storyline is as deep as anything, right from the foundation of the Warhammer world. So having the opportunity to flesh it out over the couple of decades that they've done, it really is full of depth, and I'll give it a 9 from 10 out of that.
Okay. As far as mechanics, what do you think of the mechanics of the army?
Well, and probably also similar to the other ones, their variety of troops and choices is as vast as any other army too, with maybe the only exception being Empire and Orcs and Goblins for just sheer variety of different stuff. So consequently, taking whether they're competitive or not out of it, the realm of choices that you have to field a different style army, from all cavalry to infantry heavy to, with the introduction of Phoenix, is now heavy on monsters. It's all available to you, so I'm giving it a 9 on that as well.
All right. And general fun to play for or against?
I might come in at an 8 with that one, simply because there's nothing random about it. And I actually kind of like a little bit of random nonsense in Warhammer. They're pretty reliable, and that's an attraction for many, so other people that weigh reliability higher will probably give it a higher than an 8 rating that I do, but I think there's just one little element that's missing.
Okay. Well, excellent rankings. So Skip, why don't you take?
Okay. I would say fluff-wise, I haven't really read through the High Elf book, but I have, read a little bit out of Kane now, so I'm kind of getting a feel for how they are. I would give the fluff itself, just from what I know, about a 7. I've really enjoyed what I've read, and I don't know a lot about it, so I would rank it higher if I could, if I knew a little bit more. As far as playing against them, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry, I think we just had a burp. Have you started yet? Because I think I was talking for the last minute and a half and was talking to myself.
Oh, I couldn't hear anything. I was just talking, so I'll start all over again. Sorry about that. Take 2. Okay. What I was saying is, I haven't read a lot of the High Elf fluff in their book. What I know, I've just picked up here and there, and I've kind of pieced some things together by what I've read in Kane so far. So I would have to give their fluff an overall 7. I've enjoyed what I've learned. I know that they are an old army, and I know that GW puts a lot of emphasis on them. So I would think for the fluff that I know, about a 7. Mechanics-wise, I think they play similar to Dark Elves, so I'm going to give them about a 7 on mechanics as well. Since I'm still learning that, I'm just kind of assuming they're going about the same, maybe a little difference here and there on some of the things that they can do. And I know they can go totally outrageous as well, but I'll keep it a 7 on that. And fun to play against. I've only played once or twice, but I've enjoyed it, so I'm going to give that a 10. Being a Dark Elf player, I would love to be able to use my hatred a little bit more. So, so I would like for Michael to finish painting so we can, have a little knife ear versus knife ear kind of a smackdown.
Those are always horribly messy.
Yeah. All right, Michael. As a new High Elf player, what are your rankings?
Let's see. Fluff wise, I've the High Elf book itself, I've enjoyed reading. I mean, of course, there's a couple characters in there that I hate, I can't stand, but that's with any book. And they would probably go on a 7, but after reading Kane, I'd give them a 9. Their fluff is fantastic. After I read Kane, to see those characters that you never actually get any depth on, and they get the depth. Games Workshop knows what they're doing with Elves, obviously. So I'm gonna give them a 9 out of that.
All right, mechanics.
Mechanics. Having not played them as much, I mean, they've got some weaknesses. If you don't fill in, you've got to have the chaff, which I don't ever use chaff. I need to, but I'd give them a solid 7 out of that. They're reliable and they don't do a lot of randomness, but they're not as reliable as my dwarves. They can break in combat. My dwarves never do.
Not if you use white lions, Mike.
I don't want to use white lions. There's so much. That's just more I've got to paint.
And fun to play?
That's a split decision. Playing them, it's a 9 easily. I love playing them. I love putting them on the board. They're fun. They've got a couple of neat gimmicks, and they've got some really powerful things. But yeah, playing with them is definitely not. Having played against one of our old guys who strictly took the best of the best, it's a 1. If you play against a High Elf player who just brings, here's my group of Phoenix Guard, here's my Frostheart Phoenix, here's everything that you're not going to be able to get through, it's unbearable to play. I'm going to put my models on the board and don't even bother putting yours on the board.
Okay. So before I give my rankings, I will go ahead and say, give a little bit of a disclaimer. I have an irrational fear of elves, or more particularly the high elves. I don't have this problem with the wood elves or the dark elves, but there's something mainly because I assume that I got my tail kicked so many times by the player Michael was just alluding to, one of those kind of win at all costs elf players. I get really unnerved when they just show up on the table, and it really messes with my strategy, and I think it's a lot of me psyching myself out. So my review of them may be somewhat tainted by that fact. As far as the fluff goes, I'm actually going to give my split here. Excuse me. When I look through kind of the fluff resources I have, the one thing that kind of struck me before the coming of Cain was how stereotypical the elves of Warhammer really are. I mean, they're like everybody's elves. So elves are cool, yeah, but there wasn't anything that really stuck out to me. So I would have said a 5. However, I think the Cain book was so well written and provided an extra dimension to your typical high elf versus dark elf fight with the wood elves in the middle. They're added more there, and I got a heck of a lot more enjoyment out of reading that book. And I think that by itself brought my view of their fluff up to like an 8 to a 9 range, somewhere in there. Mechanically speaking, they're strong. I really have a hard time. I've played them with several armies. I have a hard time finding the chink in that armor. So I think they're strong. They're fast. I mean, they have received both loads of love from GW and our army book shows. So I'm going to rate that a 10. As far as fun to play, I'm going to rate it about a 4. And I think I'm going to rate it about a 4 because of the ease at which the win-at-all-cost players can just stomp a mud hole into you. It's definitely an army that can be abused very, very easily. And I have had, I'll be frank in admitting it, I've had a lot more negative games where it's just getting your tail kicked and you just can't do anything. Compared to some of the more recent games, now that Michael's taken the helm of them, have been much more fun because he kind of avoids the proper combinations that make it just obscene. So yeah, I'll say 4 to 5 there. So definitely seems like we've got a good spread. So the first thing I want to actually start with before we get into the questions that folks have sent in, is a question from Kieran. You, so far to my knowledge, have been the guest we've had on who has had the longest play experience in the game. You said you've been playing about 20 years. I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on how High Elves have changed or evolved as an army during that time, or if they have, or if they're pretty much the same thing now that they were 20 years ago.
Well, I should probably precursor that and say that I certainly haven't been a high elf for 20 years. I've only been doing a high elf army for about 3 years. So that's still pretty fresh, and hence my experience with high elves in prior editions of Warhammer are from the opposite side of the field. Not from my own side. So I guess if I'm to speak to that, I would say that there was a lot of people that were butthurt about the High Elves because of their ASF ability all across the board that also overrode the Always Strike Last ability of their great swords and great weapons in the prior edition. And that rubbed some folks the wrong way, and that was, as you described as the key to success, that you would just simply take a Swordmaster or a White Lion and chop your way through everything before they'd hit you back. Remember, of course, this was also the day and age where Warhammer was, if I kill your front rank, then you get 0 attacks back, right? So that always happened when one of those units got to combat. There was counters to that. The High Elf army was not the top of the pile that I recall, because there was still a toughness 3 elf, and artillery like mortars were a lot more common, and that was the death of the elf, or something like that. I think the way that I've seen, if I think about the armies that you saw on the field, they always featured those things, those sword masters or white lions. I will say this, though, one of the restrictions that they had was their core choices in the previous books. So before this one was printed here a couple years ago, your core choices were elf with spear, elf with bow, or elf with spear and bow. That was it. So it was boring as hell to choose your core for that. It's terrible.
Kind of sounds like what the lizard men have to deal with now.
Exactly right. Yeah, and it's so restrictive, or was so restrictive. As soon as they let you put a guy on a horse, whoa! And that was just a revelation. You can have a core guy on a horse. It's magical.
And so you mentioned a little earlier that it wasn't with the until the 8th edition where they started getting the monsters, the phoenixes, and were the griffins part of the army before that? Because I seem to remember when I played early in when I was in high school before I kind of broke away that they had griffins then, but I may be hallucinating.
Well, they've always at least had a griffin as a mount, and a couple other things as mounts for their bosses. But you might be thinking about a time of Warhammer where all armies could have access to a handful of unridden monsters.
I think it was about 5th edition when I was playing. So
because there wasn't, in the last edition, there was no such thing as an unridden monster in an elf army book.
Okay.
Until the Phoenix showed up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's part and parcel why it's a little bit more versatile now, I think, than it was before.
Cool.
But
so
predominantly a shift in core choices.
Yeah. So it definitely seems to open them up. Maybe that gives some hope to the Lizardmen players that they'll get something to make their core less boring. So, out of curiosity, I mean, we were kind of talking a lot of the different units. Do you have a particular favorite unit in the Elf Army that you use? Something that just you have to include every time you play? Or?
I think I find that I default to the White Lion. I might do Phoenix Guard if I had them, but yeah, I default to the White Lion because of their reliability and because I got 40 painted. So.
All right, Michael, how about you? Is there a particular unit that you are rapidly falling in love with since you started?
Well, my favorite actual unit is the Dragon Princes. I love them. They're by far my favorite actual model. If I had a favorite, just anything in the army, it's Sir Reginald.
You might have to explain who Sir Reginald is for those that don't know.
He's my Sky Cutter. He's the bird that draws the Sky Cutter. It's not about the Sky Cutter itself. It's about Sir Reginald, the bird. He's where the magic happens.
And just for those watch, I have actually made a pledge to kill. He's numbering the Sir Reginalds as they die in the game. So you're on what, Sir Reginald the Third now?
Yeah.
So I have made a pledge that I'm going to kill Sir Reginald at least once with every army I own, because we want him to be at Sir Reginald the double digits before too much longer.
See, this is why I don't paint the rest of my army.
Because I keep killing Sir Reginald?
Exactly.
Wow.
Awesome.
Every time you kill that guy, a puppy dies. A puppy dies.
Yeah. I'm not a dog person, so I'm really not afraid of that. Let's get rid of him. So, this is a question I'm going to ask for purely selfish reasons, and I'll put it to the group because I don't have the freaking clue. What is the weakness of the Elf Army? What is exploitable? What can give a brother a chance?
Toughness 3. Toughness 3.
Yeah.
I mean, the rest of their staff.
You really don't honestly expect me to reveal the secrets, do you?
I was hoping you would take pity on a lonely old ogre, and my problem with toughness 3 as a weakness skip is that you can either encase that toughness 3 and 1-up armor if you go with the cavalry route, or if you go with an infantry route, you can kill me with always strikes first before I can lay hand on you. I mean, unless I'm going to go with something like the mortars, the war machines, or heavy shooting, which, let's be honest, the ogres particularly aren't well suited to do. It's hard to get to that toughness 3 to make use of that weakness.
Well, I'll share with you my hardest matchups, and maybe you can read into that. My hardest matchups are Skaven, Orcs and Goblins, and Empire. So the first thing you think of with all those things is you immediately recognize that those models those armies have way more models than I do. Way more models. So even though they're only a bunch of Strength 2 attacks, there's a massive Strength 3 attacks coming at you. And we can't withstand that kind of battering because our toughness is 3. Right? Yeah. Aside from the Dragon Princes that, as you say, are encased in 2+ armor, they can face that beating, but you're shooting other things. You're focusing on other things at that if you're a smart general anyway. That's where your Warp Lightning cannons go, or your Hellblaster volley gun goes, or your Doom Divers go, right?
So what you're telling me is I need 100-man brick of Noblars to face off the Elven Menace.
Yeah, that's what you need.
I gotta buy more Noblars.
Oh God, no!
Or,
no more
or this might be a stretch, but maybe you'll finally find use for that Thunder Tusk and his Spitty Frost thing.
Yeah, you know what? I've tried that, but he's not the friend of a bolt thrower. They tend to kind of put holes in his woolly ass before I can get him anywhere.
Oh, Lorenzo's got good aim.
Yeah. Actually, I probably just use my scrap launcher. That's been my friend with a lot of this stuff, because the killing blow can actually help deal with the knights on occasion, and it's a stone thrower, so it's good.
Yeah.
And it's Noblars, so that's a win for me. So let's go ahead and start getting into a few of these questions. We have our favorite two here, Vince Venturella and Mitch, MC1 Gamer, giving us a bunch of questions. So let's go ahead and get into Vince's, because he left his first. Okay. First question. Everyone knows that the High Elf book is one of the best, but what makes it so? Is it a few special units that are super powered? Is it synergy, the magic, all of the above? He says, what was the bottled lightning that this book captured?
Well, I would say that the first thing to notice about this army is it plays in all phases of the game, and it plays in all of them well. So they're fast and maneuverable. They have a high ballistic skill for shooting. They lack a war machine to smash something instantly, but their bolt throwers are still have a good reputation. They do have, out of their special units, and you have to go to special to get this, is they do have some worthy combat units in there too. And of course, having access to 9 different lores of magic is no slouch either.
I absolutely agree, Kieran. I think the other thing that makes them so amazing is because they have so much variation. Even if you know that you're about to sit down and play a list against High Elves, it's very difficult to know in total what you're going to expect. I mean, you could go all cav list, and then you've got to deal with that heavy armor. You could go magic heavy, you could go monsters, you could go infantry. They really can just do it all, so you have to kind of be ready for whatever happens. And like you said, they have enough magic. I mean, the lore of high magic is amazing. And they can access just about everything else. So you, even from a magical point, you just never know what's coming at you.
Yeah, and that might be a good point, is to think that comparatively to some other armies, and the one that jumps to mind immediately is a Warriors of Chaos army. When somebody says, "Hey, let's play tonight. I'm playing my Warriors of Chaos," you're like, "Oh well, okay, I guess I got to prepare for your Demon Prince then, and your chariots and Nurgle-marked stuff, right?
Unless you're playing against me.
Yeah. But as you say, when you're playing against High Elves, there could be. I could be an all-shooting army, and you come at me with dwarfs that are all shooting. I might outshoot you, maybe. Probably not, but maybe.
We got the armor.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's one of those things that it's still in question, I think.
Yeah.
Or if not, I mean, you don't even have to necessarily go all shooting. You can go enough. I mean, those, what were they? The strength 4 ones that you beat me silly with, the sisters. Yeah, I mean, you do a couple of those, couple units of those, and they can put some holes in some decent units, and then you back it up with some infantry to kind of sweep things up when you're done. I mean, there's definitely some hard lists. Skip, any thoughts out of you?
I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. Elves are so flexible, especially the high elves. You're going to have to prepare an all-comers list anytime that you sit down and play with somebody, I think, because you never know what they're going to be throwing at you. You don't know if it's going to be shooting. You know if it's going to be half shooting or infantry. You're going to have to just kind of be on the top of your game and just say, okay, well, I need to take something to stop spells. I need to take something that I can get to archery units quick, and then I need something that's going to punch through that cavalry armor. So it's difficult to plan for them, in my opinion.
Well, I think we definitely kind of agree on that. So yeah. I would argue that the flexibility seems to really be the trick there that makes them so good. They're, again, like I said with the Dark Elves, they just have so many good options that you can build an army with just about anything in the book and have it be decent.
Yeah.
So question number 2. What unit doesn't get used that you love and wished would be played more?
I think Michael and I have the same answer on this. I'm gonna guess, because I'm all for the Sky Cutter. I think it's a wonderful looking model, but it's not so good.
It's more that you can get a bolt thrower for a lot less if you're gonna put a bolt thrower on that. I just wish people use it more often. I would put 4 of them in my army. Just run nothing but Sky Cutter bolt throwers. That would be amazing.
Well, the trouble is it's a more expensive but mobile bolt thrower that has shorter range and misses a lot more.
That's
why it's sad.
I like Sir Reginald.
So let me ask: is because maybe I'm confused about this? Does the Sky Cutter have to have the bolt thrower on it, or is that an upgrade for it?
That's an upgrade. It can be a normal chariot.
Yeah, well, then what stops you from using it like basically everybody else chariots uses, just kind of hitting the small units, chasing down stuff? I mean,
because you can have a bolt thrower on it. Just
yeah.
Nothing's stopping you. It's just because. Why wouldn't you?
It says bolt thrower.
That's okay. That is a perfectly valid answer on this channel.
Does anybody use Shadow Warriors?
No, I don't.
Yeah, I've not used them. I know I've used them once.
Yeah, that was actually going to be my answer too. The models look pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really know much about them, but I've never, like, even in battle reports and stuff I've watched, I've never seen anybody bring any.
If they're the equivalent of like shades for Dark Elves, I think that would be a really strong unit. I mean, I haven't seen the book on it, but can you give them great weapons, or do they? Because with shades you can. No. I didn't know if the High Elves have that option or not. With their
hand weapons.
That's the thing they fall short of.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I literally know nothing about them. I just think the new models look cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, the models look really nice.
But I have to say, probably my favorite unit that you just don't see played because the other option is way better, is the Fire Phoenix. I think a well-painted Fire Phoenix looks amazing on the table, and it's not a bad unit. It's got some kind of fun, interesting rules, and can kind of give you some other options. But I think the Frostheart Phoenix is just objectively better, so no one ever plays the fire one that I see.
Yeah, and I'll agree with that. The Fire Phoenix is good if you're willing to spend the points to put a rider on it. For a couple reasons, because you got a little more controllability of him, and he's a bit more fighty with the hero on there. You got to remember that the Frost Phoenix by himself only has 3 attacks. I mean, 3 strength 5 attacks. So you get that out of a man-eater, right? So it's not a combat monster. But the other reason you'd put a rider on there is because you increase by 1 that die roll to pop back up after you go down in cinders. So that's awesome. Where it's good.
Yeah.
I'm kind of hoping with the expansion of points to 50% for Lords that I'll take the opportunity to do that more, because to reasonably field that guy, you're spending 500 points on a single model otherwise.
Yeah. I know for us, I mean, we've been doing a lot more mounted characters since the point expansion, so I don't see why High Elves should miss out on that fun too. Okay, so question number 3. Who is your favorite special character from the High Elves, and who should be strung up and dragged behind a pair of purebred Bretonnian warhorses?
Well put.
I'll go ahead and do this one first because I've been thinking about this one. I really like the Everqueen. I like the idea of her position, kind of what she is in the Elven society, but particularly the reading of Cain. I really think, what's her name, Aluriel? I can't pronounce half the elf names, so the current elf queen, Everqueen. She's a strong female character, and frankly, there's not a lot of those in Warhammer other than the evil ones. And Bretonnia, I think, is pretty much your 2 options. So I really like that. As far as who should be strung up and dragged behind a pair of purebred Bretonnian warhorses, Teclis, man. He needs to die, and he needs to die bad for everything that happened in Cain. And if he's dead already, he needs to get drugged back and die again.
I knew that you'd say that.
I make no secret of it, man. I mean, just the shit he did. I mean, he deserves it. He deserves death. It's so who's next?
Well, I'm going to put it out for Altharion. And the reason I choose him is he's been a long-standing elf hero from back in the early days. He's been through many campaigns, including invasions of Nagaroth, defending Yvresse against the incursions of Grom the Paunch from the Misty Mountains, and he's seen a lot of times. He's also the first elf character that really came out as a fallible elf. Some of them have proven to be that, especially in the Cain book now, but he was the guy that could just get battle raged and a little bit angry about things and throw caution to the wind and do that kind of thing. So I think that's why he appeals to me. As far as one I could do without, I kind of think of Tyrion and Teclis as a one character because they've always kind of come together. And my only knock against them is it's actually strictly storyline based. I feel that their story is stolen from, if you guys were ever exposed to Dragonlance.
Yes.
That's
Kieran and Raistlin.
Yeah, exactly. Those 2 guys. I feel that they stole that storyline from there. They got the super powerful fighting brother and his frail brother who's the master of wizardry.
Of course, that would take the Dragonlance story in a whole new direction if Kieran became the embodiment of Takasis or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I can definitely agree with that one. Michael, Skip, who's next?
My favorite's got to be Corhill, the
Mm.
White Lion character. I like him. He beat a white lion to death with his hands. I mean, he went straight Hercules on it, and I got to give him respect for that because that's badass.
Leave it to the dwarf player to have a favorite elf who's a brawler.
And he carries a giant axe.
Right.
Yeah.
There's no way that he cannot be my favorite.
Right.
One I dislike. I'm with you on Teclis. He's a dick. He needs to get killed more than 20 times.
There's some definite Teclis hate in the room today. All right, Skip.
Definitely got to go with Teclis, who I would want to drag behind Bretonnian horses several times over. I like Corhill too, but I've got to go for Ladriel. Or Lilith. I can't. I've never can pronounce that. But I've got to go with that.
Oh, you're talking
Using the elven goddess. All right.
Yeah.
Who is the freaking Lady of the Lake? That's why he likes her.
Yeah. She can hurl a scimitar anytime. Yeah.
Oh Jesus. Okay, let's actually go into a little bit of lore left field here. Mm-hmm. So, dealing with the whole reveal finally in 8th that Lilith is actually the Lady of the Lake. Lore-wise, at least as far as I remember it, it was like a rumor for a long time that maybe the Lady of the Lake was just some powerful elf mage. So they've at least upgraded it to that it was an actual goddess and not just some elf who was bored and messing with them. What do you guys feel that that's a little left field? I personally think that there's not a lot of good connection between Bretonnia and the elves, except for that, and it just seems to be just another way to knock the humans while elevating the elves in the fluff. What do you guys think?
This is Games Workshop. The elves will always be their favorite.
I'm going to take the opposite view. I think because the Bretonnians have some contact with wood elves, I don't see that being, too out of the ordinary, to be honest with you. If they came across in their early stages somebody, they'd never met an elf before, and they see this elf coming up out of the mystical rivers, and I mean, I would lay down and go, but I could see the connection there. I really can.
I think maybe you can flip it over and look at it from an opposite perspective. So you're thinking of it, or the way you propose it, as that they're taking away my goddess. I'm a human, they're taking away my goddess because it's an elf goddess and I don't have a real one of my own. But maybe you should think of it as a blessing that you were given that goddess in the first place. Bretonnians are pretty simple people, let's be fair.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Not very imaginative. So when something presents itself like that, you take it on.
Yeah. All right, I'll bite on that one. So, point 4. What is it about high elves that provoke such visceral reactions? People seem to either love them or hate them. Is it their attitude, their rules, their history in the game, GW's love? What do you guys think?
Well, I think we said a few of those things already along the way. The one thing that I wanted to come back and touch on, though, is I wonder if some of it is gameplay experience, because a couple of you guys made mention that you really didn't have a fun time sitting across the table from a high elf army, and you know, obviously that's a little disappointing for me to hear. But is it the gameplay that puts you off? Does that make you hate elves?
It's when somebody takes the hardest thing they can, and you know that you can't beat that.
I mean,
And does that happen more with the elves than Warriors of Chaos or otherwise?
The Phoenix Guard False Heart Phoenix combo, really.
yeah. I think
I've got a fourth ward.
Yeah, I
Not
think
bad.
for me, it may not necessarily be that it's not something, that kind of beating is not something that can happen with another army. It's just I was repetition ended up burning it in my brain. Because when the player in question was talking to us or was playing with us, it was one of only 5 armies in our entire group. It was back when we all only had one army, and so every time you played with this particular player, he brought this same dick kicker high elf list, and it was just, I mean, just brutalized. And so, like like I specified earlier, my hate may very well be irrational, or rather, and it's not even necessarily hate; it's fear. I'm afraid of pointy ears. It's just the way it works. And who knows? Maybe if Michael plays it and we get more experience to it, that'll change. But I think I mean, in my sort of formative months of getting back into the hobby, just absolutely getting bitch slapped by high elves every time I turned around. It was like every third game I played was against the high elves, and I was beat, I mean, in tournament terms, 25-0 on a 20-0 scale. So it's... I think it's that for me. It's just bad initial experience at the hands of a win-at-all-cost player.
Mm-hmm.
And I can say that I didn't experience that because I never got a chance to play against the high elves, thank goodness. So I don't have a bitter outlook towards them as maybe Josh and Michael do. So I can't really say that I hate anything that they do because I've never experienced that coming against me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, I think the other thing I'd add about the love and hate thing of high elves is I think of my parallels with Games Workshop's fantasy world is with Tolkien's fantasy world, and I think with that one, you pick sides. You pick whether you want to be a dwarf guy or whether you want to be an elf guy in the Tolkien world, and that carries over, or at least for me it does.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a dwarf guy.
Really, we couldn't tell.
So yeah, consequently, I can't really like dwarfs because I like Tolkien elves over Tolkien dwarfs. So that carries over to
I don't
Warhammer.
like Tolkien's dwarves either. I like dwarves.
There you go.
Tolkien murdered the dwarves.
Right. Yeah. So I think that's what I have to offer about why it
Yeah.
provokes a visceral reaction, as he puts it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can agree with that. So let's go on to Mitch's, and strangely enough, Mitch I think asks a bit more heavy hitting fluff questions. So we'll get into that for the second bit of this. So and his first question is really more of a plea. He just says, "Please discuss the fluff from the book." There's some great background regarding the origins of the split between the elves, and given the reconciliation with the elven hosts in the end times, it would be nice to go over what precipitated the rift initially. Why did the Dark Elves leave? It wasn't just because of Malekith. There's more to it. So, what do you guys think about that? What caused the split? Was it really a cult of personality with Malekith, or?
It was a cult of something,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
but not of personality.
Right.
So the greater thing at play there was in fact Marathi, who was married to an Aryan, and Malekith was their son together. So during the lead up to Malekith's adulthood and his service with the new Phoenix King, or the interim Phoenix King, after Anarion died, she was dabbling in Slaanesh, and cults of Slaanesh were popping up all over Nagarath and in secret pockets within the nobility of elven nations throughout the other provinces. So that's where the seed was coming from, and that's where the seed of the Dark Elves really grew. She, through her manipulations, always was whispering in Malekith's ear about how he should be more than just the best general that the High Elves have. He should be the Phoenix King, etc., etc. So she drove him to the point where he was forcing his hand to take that over. What people don't understand about that too is Malekith at first was resisting that. He was resisting those machinations of his mother, and he was actually working with the High Elf nobility to weed out these little pockets and cults of Slaanesh. Except for he was always looking a little further away from home, and not at Morathi. He was further afield, searching out these Slaaneshi things. Mm-hmm. Eventually, he accused the Phoenix King of the time that he was a Slaanesh follower, and murdered him. And that's what led to the big revolt.
Yeah, I think it's really funny. The story about that really reminds me of that movie Alexander with God, what the hell is her name? Angelina Jolie as the mother of Alexander. It's like I could totally see her being Morathi, and just kind of like manipulative, using your son's love and just twisting it like crazy and turning you into a just ambitious dick.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So that's just kind of who I think of when I think of Morathi, and I read through all of Cain, just imagining it being Angelina Jolie and just a burned up Colin Farrell.
I always forget that he's still scorched from trying to walk through the fires.
Yeah.
I always forget that. It's hilarious.
So, see, I think, Kieran, I think you gave a great rundown of the fluff of that. I agree. I think it really is more Morathi than Malekith, which, strangely enough, that actually makes the character of Malekith a little weaker, in my opinion. Up until, basically, he breaks off with her in Cain. And it's just like, I'm going to go do my own thing now. And you kind of see a little bit of that in the book, but I still think even in that they focus very, very heavily on the manipulations of Morathi rather than Malekith really being a protagonist in his own story.
I think that he just ends up being a pawn of whoever's will is greater than his. Because he doesn't really say, screw you, Mom, to Morathi until he's under the sway of Teclis and becoming manipulated by him.
Yeah. So doesn't that mean he's going to be like the worst Phoenix King ever?
Probably.
Well, you know.
Or Eternity King, as they're calling him now.
Yeah.
He'll be eternally manipulated.
Yeah.
All right, so question 2. How does the High Elf Pantheon tie into the general storyline? Again, some of this has been discussed in the Cain book, but there's a lot of origin story in the High Elf book and how they fit into the world from a 30,000-foot level. It'd be nice to hear more about this.
Michael, what do you know about elf gods?
I know Cain, I know Thurin, their main one, and Lilith, their magic god. I mean, those are the ones that really just, hey, we're more important than everybody else.
Well, it's, I mean, there's a lot as far as their gods go that they kind of steal straight from sort of your Greek myths. I mean, they've got essentially the versions of everybody. I mean, they switch out lightning for fire in terms of their key god, but, I mean, you've got Hephaestus. I mean, they're just a lot of elven god tropes, I guess, would be my best way. And admittedly, my reading of it was cursory, so maybe if Kieran can enlighten me to the difference, but I haven't picked up on it yet.
No, I actually think that you're spot on, that it does parallel that Greek/Roman pantheon of gods and their roles. Sure, you have Vol, the Forge Master, you have Kurnos, who is the god of the hunt. Your god of murder, Cain, can be equated to Ares, the god of war, of course. Goddess of love, goddess of life, goddess of healing, they're all there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what parts that they play kind of have, as they described, a bit of a cyclical thing. They talk about that in the Cain book of how it comes in cycles, where it goes sort of shifts from a Cain-heavy, angry fight war side of things, and eventually over to a Liliath side of things, which is the peace and healing and life side of it, and that goes in a cycle with minor players in between. But it really, if you want to simplify it, it can really just simply boil down to the three predominant ones, and that being Liliath, Cain, and Anarian.
Yeah.
Sorry, Assyrian, not Anarian.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's too much to get complicated from in there. If as he wants it, as he says, he wants it as a 3,000 foot level. Well, that's kind of it. There's three important gods, and the other ones just play bit parts that you can make some stories about.
Mm-hmm. All right. So number 3, many of the units are derived from the various provinces in the Elven kingdoms. White Lions of Trace, for one. Fluffy lists are not always competitive, but they can be fun to build, paint, play. Which theme would you like to see focused on in an army list, and how would you build it? Remember, you need to focus on units that mainly come from the region, filled in with generic models, spearmen, bowmen, etc., that are present in every area.
Okay. Michael, you want to take that first?
I'm trying to think of how I would build that kind of list.
Direction. Like I think of a heavy cavalry one as a Tyrannok style, where you would have within there silver helms and chariots and reavers from nearby Illyrian, which fill that out. So everything on a horse is a good thematic strength. I've tried to push for ones in the past that are very sort of Avalorn and Crace related, and the reason why those two are tied is because the White Lions act as bodyguard in some ways to the Everqueen when she...
Uh-oh. I think Kieran got froze on us.
Oh.
Can you hear us, Kieran?
So I'd imagine, yeah, I'm with you.
Okay. You just paused for about 15 seconds. So,
and now you guys...
I think we're having some connectivity issues. My thought is if I were to do something like that, I would build it out of the... And I'm having trouble remembering the names, but where all the Shadow Elves are?
Nagaroth.
They're in
Nagaroth.
Yeah. And go heavy like Shadow Elves. You'd have to rely heavy on your core, because, I mean, other than the Shadow Elves, I'm not entirely sure what fits there. I might paint up, like, for your chaff, paint up some Black Eagles or something, make them all shadowy looking. Something like that, cool. I like that. In all honesty, probably with that group, I would do more of an United Elven thing and bring in more of the Wood Elf style, make an Avoidance style army. That would be me.
Mm-hmm.
So, thoughts?
I think I'd like to go a heavy Caldor list.
Just cram magic down your opponent's throat until they explode?
No, the Dragon Princes.
What? Okay, I think we are breaking up pretty bad. All right. Well, that actually runs us, since we're having some connectivity issues, that's actually running us to the end of our questions. Let me check the comments. And we have been going for about an hour now. In the way of comments here. So, one last question I guess we'll engage as a group before we wrap it up. At the end, and this will be a little bit of a spoiler alert, so if anyone hasn't read Kane, go ahead and mute the mic, or mute the computer right now. But at the end of Kane, it definitely talks about the High Elves being the ones seemingly least okay with the reunited elf kingdom and the loss of Ulthuan. Specifically talks about how there's like a bunch of suicides and stuff like that. How do you guys see, if they maintain the fluff of what happens in the end times and kind of moves on past this, what do you see, if anything, changing about the High Elves as the story progresses?
Well, I think that their reaction I initially thought was reasonable, seeing as they're the ones that lost the most. The Dark Elves voluntarily gave up on Nagaroth to try to reclaim Ulthuan. So it was the High Elves that were kind of caught out by it sinking into the sea and having to uproot everything that they've lived for thousands and thousands of years. I honestly think that they'll go back to being nomadic and explore the world a little bit more. They had a high age a couple thousand years ago of vast exploration and going to other far reaches of the Warhammer world. So I think that there'll be a big resurgence to that, honestly.
Like fleets of elven ships just traveling all over and finding what they can.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Michael, Skip, what do you guys think?
I can see that they aren't going to be as high and mighty as, I hate to use the word high since we're talking about high elves, but I think that they're not going to be as pompous as I think that the high elves could be. I mean, they've been kind of knocked off their a high peg for, that they've been on for generations, and they're having to deal with things that they've never had to deal with before. And being around Dark Elves, they're going to start maybe embracing more of their other passions than they have in the past. I think that exposure to them, that's why I see it going.
See, that's interesting because my answer would be the exact opposite. I actually think they're going to become more pompous and more aggressive. I think you're going to see them, they'll look at the countries around them, Bretonia, the Empire, whatever, and just go, oh, this is nothing like the grandeur of Ulthuan. These poor savages, we should help them and show them what a true society is. And so I see them getting very conquest and sort of getting even more hard-nosed as they're kind of reacting to being fish out of water in the old world now.
I think that that's going to be more the angle of the Dark Elf society of things now that they're supplanted to Athalauren. Obviously, they're the more aggressive of the three, and I think they'll look to expand beyond the borders of the woods.
And what do you think, Michael?
I frankly, I don't see how they're all living together, but apparently in Games Workshop, that's just how it works. A couple of centuries of just brutal hatred and murdering one another, and we're okay. We're friends now.
It's all right. As far as the space thing goes, you can stack 3 or 4 elves in a closet like cordwood, and they'll be all right. So there's plenty of room. So you think it's going to devolve into another civil war?
Yeah.
They're just going to start killing each other?
I mean, you look at it. They've got their leadership, or they've got their control by either. They basically got their control by Malekith right now.
Mm-hmm.
What happens when Malekith dies, and there's not a strong hand there?
Yeah. So a thought just occurred to me. What if this is totally a sneaky way for Games Workshop to set up for all three of the Elven armies to be squatted? So they're all living in Athelor and real happy. The forest spirits are all pissed off. Beast magic actually goes into one of the forest spirits who leads the revolt and just murders all three races of elves. And so the elves are replaced by a forest spirit army that's actually good.
Huh. I'm okay with that.
I'm not okay with that.
Yeah, 7,000 points of high elves would probably be a pain in the ass with no army.
Well, I got 5,000 points of wood elves too. That are a lot of forest spirits. That's the real reason.
Right.
I just don't think that has any character. I don't think that a forest spirit force has a lot of character to it.
You don't?
That's why I think that would be sad.
Huh.
And a bunch of beastmen that just like dance around rocks and fling poo at each other. That's not exciting either.
Hey. They also eat things.
They eat poo, yes, that's right. They eat poo as well.
Yeah.
They
do three things.
I think the forest spirits bark will be more than their bite.
Well, how do we recover from that?
Does this Google Toolbox have a slap function in it somewhere? Can we do that? Comments. John Telby says that he thinks the High Elves and the Elves in general might take to the rebuilding of the world after the end times, kind of like the Marshall Plan after the end of the Second World War.
Well, that would be a repeated pattern, because after the last biggest incursion of chaos that trampled through the Empire, it was the High Elves that nurtured that race back to succession, establishing the colleges of magic with Teclis, etc. So I think the High Elves kind of see themselves as that patriarchal race.
Mm-hmm.
My poor peasants.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm going to be interested to see, because I mean, obviously, the big fight that this is leading to, that it's been talking about, is leading with Archeon and the forces of chaos swing south, Nagash and his forces swinging north, and the elves are kind of stuck in the middle of that. And between them and obviously, I mean, the Scave book is the next one to come out. It'll be interesting to see kind of how those four groups end up clashing, because obviously at this point the humans don't really matter, minus of course Shazam and the Night King. But it'll be interesting to see kind of how those four big powers seem to slay each other.
Yeah, well, I don't think the elves are going to go quietly into the night, though. That's the one thing that I feel pretty certain about. A big part to play still.
Yeah. So, definitely seems like there is some future for the elves. Particularly with the whole, like, hey, we're building a secret universe where the dark gods can't get in, where we can go start over everything. Also, as a side note, and I don't want to get into Kane too much since we're wrapping up here, but how does that make Manfred von Karstein that he totally misses out on the creation of a god of death in his own dungeons? I mean, I mean, yeah, I know he's out being Nagash's boy at this point in the story, but you would think he would have at least one necromancer hanging out at home, just watching the spirits of these dead elves just kind of wander through and be consumed by a prisoner he has. I mean, they could have sent a letter, is all I'm saying. And
He's gonna be like Dr. Evil. He's gonna sit there and say, exactly what do I pay you people for?
you
don't pay us,
don't
sir.
pay us, sir. Well, then what do I not kill you people for?
People die.
But yeah, so and that's the other thing that like occurs to me. How might the elves change? Being that, according to the end of Cain, the only god that they have that has any power is a god of the dead.
Yeah, it's a bit of an odd one. Again, it's difficult to understand the pantheon and how they're relevant in a topsy-turvy age. But it's, yeah, I don't know. To answer your question about Mr. Vampire, obviously he was preoccupied about his own crap, and his focus was on how do I turn my dominance
guess.
over the Nash and control the world. So I guess what they tried to get at in the storyline is that he recognized a spark in this elf of something a little bit odd, so he wanted to collect her, and then that was the last of their interaction, really, because he ran off on a campaign to Nakara.
Which really is it's a shame to me for Manfred. They paint him as this as so intelligent and the best of the Van Karsteins and blah 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 blah, and he kind of just seems to be the fall guy for all this shit in the in the end times. It's like we need a dupe. Manfred, you go. But let's not get that get too much into that. All right, guys. Well, looks like as far as comments go, Lord Tremendous says he actually gets to listen to this as he works and has commanded that we entertain him. So hopefully we've done at least that, Lord T.
I'm going to make him love elves.
Good luck, sir. If you can make Lord Tremendous love elves, you need a freaking medal.
Or else I'll make elves love him.
Yeah. So Vince says, from your earlier reference about puppies, he says, that's nonsense, Kieran. Everyone knows that puppies smile, angels get their wings, and rainbows shower from heaven every time an elf dies. He thinks Lord T would have his back on this one.
Maybe.
And in reference to your comment, Skip, Vince also says, could you just think the elves will just get up and leave, Skip? And he demands that next episode contain a 100% increase in puns. If that is the case, you may very well see an on-screen suicide next week. I don't think I can handle it. But it was another great episode, guys. I think we did talk a lot about the elves here. We've learned a few things. Kieran, thank you very much for coming on and chatting with us tonight.
It was a pleasant time. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. And anybody have some last-minute thoughts to sucker down?
The dwarves will be the ones who win. We've gotten a mention one time.
Okay. Yeah, it still doesn't. Just saying it over and over again doesn't make it true, Michael.
I just have to have that little bit of hope.
Yeah, and I take my joy in crushing it, so. All right, guys. Well, thank you. This is episode 17 in the bag. Next week, what is? Oh yeah. Next week we are going to have our last episode before Christmas. We do have to take 2 weeks off because Wednesdays are like Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve are both on a Wednesday. But next week we are going to have with us Mr. Remington Steele, all the way from the UK, staying up very, very late to chat with us. And we're going to be dealing with Beastmen. So you guys, hope everyone tunes in for that. It'll be at the same time. Remy is being an absolute trooper and getting up at like 2 in the morning his time to come chat with us, so it should be fun. But again, thank you guys all for watching, and goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye, world.